Hello, Muslim friends of the world. Amid the hustle and bustle of Los Angeles, the Nur Cahaya Islamic Hospital stood tall as an oasis of tranquility. With its modern architectural design blended with Islamic touches, the hospital was not only a place for healing, but also a sanctuary for those seeking solace. Each morning, the staff's prayers echoed through the halls, creating a warm and serene atmosphere for patients from all walks of life. Dr. Ahmad, the wise and respected director of the hospital, began the day with a routine meeting with his team. Remember, our duty is not just to heal the body, but also to calm the soul. We are here to serve, not just to work, he said with a reassuring smile that inspired his team. Outside, the sun shone brightly, but the wind carried an unusual feeling. The oppressive heat made many people uneasy. In the hospital garden, an elderly patient, Grandma Khadija, sat reading the Quran. "Something feels strange today," she murmured, her eyes scanning the reddening sky. By midday, startling news broke over the radio in the nurses' station. A massive wildfire has engulfed the hills in northern Los Angeles. The fire is spreading rapidly due to strong winds. Residents are advised to stay alert and prepare for possible evacuation. A young nurse, Aisha, who had recently moved to Los Angeles, felt a wave of panic. "Doctor Ahmad, do you think the fire could reach us?" she asked anxiously. Dr. Ahmad remained calm despite the alarming news. "We don't know for sure, but we must stay calm and prepare ourselves. Remember, Allah's protection is always near if we put our trust in Him." As the afternoon wore on, the tension grew. The once blue sky turned gray, blanketed by thick smoke visible from the hospital's upper floors. Patients and staff began to question their safety. "Are we safe here?" they murmured in worry. Amid the rising concern, Dr. Ahmad called all staff and patients to gather in the main hall. He invited them to perform congregational prayers, seeking Allah's protection. In the background, the sound of distant fire truck sirens added to the atmosphere of urgency, but the collective prayers echoed with unwavering hope. "O Allah, you are the best of protectors. We entrust everything to you, Doctor," Ahmad whispered, his voice trembling with faith. Outside, the wind grew stronger, and the fiery blaze crept closer to the city limits. The situation seemed to spiral toward disaster. Yet within the Nur Cahaya Islamic Hospital, the flame of faith burned brighter than the approaching inferno. That night, Los Angeles became a city under siege. The wildfire, which had initially seemed distant, now spread with alarming speed, fueled by fierce winds that carried embers into new areas. From the upper floors of Nur Cahaya Islamic Hospital, staff could see the raging inferno consuming the hills and creeping steadily toward the nearby neighborhoods. In the emergency ward, the atmosphere grew tense. Conscious patients began to panic, while their families demanded answers from the nurses. "Are we safe here? Why hasn't anyone ordered an evacuation yet?" asked a distraught relative, her voice trembling. Dr. Ahmad maintained his composure despite the escalating fear. He convened an emergency meeting with the department heads in the hospital's control room. "Our priority is the critical patients," he said firmly. "If evacuation becomes necessary, we must be ready to move them first." On the large screen in front of them, live news broadcasts showed harrowing images of homes reduced to ash and streets engulfed in flames. Outside, the sky burned an ominous red, casting a haunting glow over the city. Ash and charred debris rained down, and the air became thick and suffocating. Security staff worked tirelessly to reinforce the hospital's perimeter, while medical teams rushed to secure vital equipment in case of an emergency. In the pediatric ward, a 7-year-old asthma patient named Malik suddenly struggled to breathe. His mother wept helplessly by his bedside. "Please save my son," she cried out. Aisha, the young nurse, quickly sprang into action. She grabbed an emergency inhaler and knelt beside the frightened boy. "Breathe slowly, Malik. You'll be okay," she reassured him, though her own eyes betrayed her fear as she glanced at the fiery horizon visible through the window. The tension peaked when the power unexpectedly went out, plunging the hospital into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting eerie shadows in the hallways. "Activate the backup generator now," shouted one of the technicians, his voice echoing in the chaos. In the main hall, patients and their families gathered, their whispered prayers rising into a collective murmur that grew louder and louder. "Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil," they repeated, seeking solace in Allah's protection. Dr. Ahmad stood at the front, leading a special prayer. His voice was steady, though his heart weighed heavy with responsibility. Then a security guard burst into the hall, panting heavily. "Doctor, the fire has reached the main road outside. We need to make a decision now," he exclaimed urgently. Dr. Ahmad raised his hand, signaling for calm. "We will not let fear control us," he said firmly. "Allah is with us, and we must continue to trust Him while doing all we can to ensure everyone's safety." But outside, the fire's relentless advance seemed unstoppable. Flames licked at the edges of the hospital's outer grounds, setting a storage shed in the back ablaze. Staff shouted in alarm, "Fire! It's in the rear courtyard!" Just as despair threatened to take hold, something extraordinary began to unfold. The night sky, thick with smoke, was suddenly obscured by dark clouds. A cold breeze swept through, and moments later, the first drops of rain fell. At first, it was only a light drizzle, but soon it turned into a downpour. The rain soaked the parched ground, dousing the embers and slowing the fire's progress. The staff and patients watched in awe as the flames that had seemed unstoppable began to weaken. Inside, Malik's mother whispered, "Subhanallah, this is His mercy." Aisha, still holding Malik's hand, felt tears welling up in her eyes. "It's a miracle," she whispered back. Though the rain had provided a reprieve, the question lingered in everyone's minds. Was it enough to save the hospital, or was the worst still to come? The rain continued to fall, gradually shifting from a light drizzle to a heavy downpour. For those inside Nur Kahaya Islamic Hospital, the change in weather felt like a divine intervention. The once terrifying crackle of flames and the roar of the wind seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the soothing sound of rain on the roof. It was as if nature itself was lending a hand to quell the chaos outside. Inside the hospital, the tension began to ease. Patients and their families, who had been holding their breath in fear, began to allow themselves to relax. Malik, the young boy who had struggled to breathe earlier, was now resting peacefully in his mother's arms. His labored breathing had slowed, and the inhaler had worked its magic. Aisha, exhausted but relieved, sat at his bedside, silently praying in gratitude. However, the danger was far from over. In the distance, they could still hear the crackling of fire, and the winds that had once propelled the flames were now shifting erratically. The staff worked tirelessly to monitor the situation, moving patients and equipment into safer areas of the hospital. But the most significant shift had come from the sky itself. The downpour seemed to intensify just as the fire had nearly reached the hospital's outer perimeter. The downpour soaked the parched earth and dampened the flames, which had been threatening to consume the buildings. Outside, firefighters arrived, although their numbers were too few to manage the vast scale of the fire. Despite their efforts, it seemed that the relentless blaze was slowly starting to subside, thanks to the unexpected rainfall. In the midst of the smoke and steam rising from the soaked grounds, firefighters were left dumbfounded. One of the firemen approached Dr. Ahmad, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Doctor, we've seen a lot of fires in this city, but we've never witnessed something like this. The fire was advancing so fast, and suddenly, this. It's like the rain appeared out of nowhere. It's a miracle." Dr. Ahmad smiled softly, his heart full of gratitude. "It is not a coincidence," he said calmly. "This is the mercy of Allah. We've trusted Him to protect us, and He has responded." As the storm gradually began to ease, the fire's fury had been reduced to mere embers, and the wind that had once carried the flames now brought cool relief. The skies cleared, and the full moon shone down upon a city that had endured one of its darkest nights. Hours passed, and the situation began to stabilize. The fire had lost its power and retreated, leaving the area around Nur Kahaya Islamic Hospital untouched. Nearby buildings, however, were not as fortunate. The neighborhood had been scorched, with homes and businesses reduced to ash. But the hospital stood tall, its walls intact, and its grounds miraculously untouched by the inferno. The next morning, the city was still in shock. The news outlets were flooded with stories of the fire's destruction, but there was one headline that stood out among the rest. "Miracle at Nur Kahaya, Islamic Hospital survives unscathed in the wake of Los Angeles wildfire." Reporters arrived at the scene, eager to capture the story behind the miracle, and the residents of Los Angeles gathered in disbelief, marveling at the hospital that had been spared. Dr. Ahmad stood outside, speaking with the media. "This was not our doing," he said humbly. "This is the result of faith and trust in Allah. We prayed for His protection, and He has answered us. May we always be reminded of His mercy." The media frenzy didn't faze him. He knew that the true lesson was not about the hospital's survival, but about the reminder of Allah's presence in their lives. The community felt the same way, with many people visiting the hospital to express their gratitude and offer thanks for the miracle they had witnessed. In the following days, the story of the miraculous survival of Nur Kahaya Islamic Hospital spread far and wide. People from all walks of life, Muslim and non-Muslim alike, visited to witness the incredible story for themselves. Some found new faith in Allah, while others were moved to reflect on the power of prayer and unity. For Dr. Ahmad and his staff, the experience solidified their belief that no matter how dire the circumstances, faith, prayer, and trust in Allah were the keys to overcoming any challenge. As for the people of Los Angeles, they had witnessed a miracle, one that would be told and retold for generations to come.